Hi, this is Daniel Hutchins, and today we are going to be doing another Marvel Insider check-in. So I know it's been a while since we've done a Marvel Insider check-in, so today's Marvel Insider check-in will be the Marvel Insider check-in of 10/25/20. Okay, so I'm going to read you the stats and then get going. Alright, so I'm still a level elite. 76,450 points needed to reach next level, and 232,050 redeemable points. And the last time I was on Marvel Insider was about 3 days ago. So here we go. I'm going to do a couple activities and go on from there then. So yeah. The first activity we are going to be talking about is the making of the X-Men animated series. If it ever loads. Internet can be really slow sometimes. Yes, there it is. So, the making of X-Men, the animated series. So, we interviewed the creators of the 90s hit cartoon, X-Men, the animated series. You could watch it on Disney+. The interview has been edited and condensed for clarity. Almost 30 years after its debut, fans of the X-Men animated series will get an inside look at what it took to develop, write, and draw one of the most beloved series of its decade. On sale now from Abrams Books. X-Men, The Art of Making the Animated Series is packed with nearly 1,500 never-before-seen concept sketches, storyboards, models, layouts, and celluloids, and art-based history on the show that made the X-Men a household name. Okay. In October of 1992, a worldwide audience was introduced to X-Men the Animated Series, its core cast, a team and found family bonded for life by the X gene that gives them superpowers but leaves them on the outs of society, in a world that fears their existence. A mix of comic adaptations and original stories, X-Men the Animated Series stands as one of the most successful superhero cartoons of all time. And for many fans, it was their first and most definite take on Children of the Atom. The ratings we got told us that there were some Saturdays that over half of the televisions in the U.S. were watching the show, says series showrunner. And that's just such a weird, huge thing. It's like Monday morning, of course, that's what the kids are talking about. Over the course of its 76-episode run, X-Men animated series held tight demands on deadline, direction, and maintaining a constant output of animations traveling domestically and overseas. Series director and producer, Larry Houston remembered how demanding the job could be. There were no computers then. I brought in my collection of X-Men comic books to work. And when I went to hand out stories to the artists, I'd put them on the Xerox machine, copy the pages I thought were pertinent, just realizing how many tens of thousands of art elements that were involved in getting a show done. There'd be half a second of screen time that might be 8 or 9 layers of paint, backgrounds, part of this character, part of another character. They spoke to creators Larry Houston, Eric Lewald, and Julia Leeward about the show's origin, favorite episodes, and where they stand on Cyclops and Wolverine. Okay. We'll start at the beginning. You came in the X-Men fold first, working on cartoons as director and storyboard artist. Yeah, that's correct. I started working at Marvel Productions with Stan Lee back in '81. I'd been a fan of the X-Men for a long time, and it was myself that had the X-Men animated series, co-director, and pilot producer. We were all three fanboys, and it got to a point where we had executive producer behind the project, and I'll say, she found some money in the budget to do a pilot episode called Pride of the X-Men. So we got a chance to at least try and show the network we did our best to throw out the kitchen sink, but we had to make compromises, unfortunately. The people who were banking for Pride of the X-Men, Crocodile Dundee was popular at the time, and so one of the executives asked us, hey, what about making Wolverine Australian? And we were going, oh, God, no. But we figured, okay, lesson learned. But because of Larry. It was valuable what Larry and Will had done. Other people had ideas about changing the anime series before it came out, making it younger or sillier or whatever. And there were times when we just had to put our foot down and say, no, we're not going to put merchandise in the middle of our X-Men show. Then in February of 1992, you got your shot. X-Men the Anime Series was greenlit. Margaret had wanted to do the show for 10 years. Nobody in Hollywood believed the X-Men could be popular. She'd pitch it and pitch it, but they said, no, this is too weird. This is too inside comic booky. So, Margaret could never get it sold. When she got ready to do it, she picked the people that she thought would be the strongest. She immediately went to Larry and Will, and then I called after. Went into the first meeting in February with you-know-who, 30 people, and I didn't know a damn thing about the X-Men. I just had to smile and nod my head and say, sure, yes, yeah. What about that guy Will said? That sounds good to me, yeah. There were only 3 networks. You may have only had a few syndicated channels, depending on how big the city was that you lived in. But you couldn't watch TV on your cell phone. You couldn't Google anything. And the X-Men, I'm not being sacrilegious when I say this. The X-Men were a big deal for Marvel. But to the average person on the street, oh, the X-Men? Maybe I've heard of them. Yeah, Margaret Loesch warned us that we were writing stories. She said that you can have 85% to 90% of your audience on Saturday morning not knowing who these people are. Make sure that you're really clear about who everybody is, what their powers are, what their relationships are. Okay? So, without Margaret, we wouldn't have gotten anything. I mean, Margaret was the force behind Spider-Man, Power Rangers, The Tick. She put all those shows out there. Even then, believe it or not, she had to put her job on the line. Her boss said, look, I don't get this X-Men thing. It's so dark. It's adult. It's grim. I don't think kids are going to watch this. But you seem to really believe in this. And she said, I absolutely believe in this. He said, to the point where if this doesn't work the first season, you're done. I fire you. She said, absolutely. She never told us that. She never told us that until way later. Yeah, she protected everybody. She took all the battles on herself. So Eric, Julia, you're now at the helm of the showrunner and series writers. What's the first initial step? Well, for me, having to be in charge of the scripts and stories, I immediately called Larry, then series writer, Mark Edens, and I laid out the first 26 episodes, knowing that there would be 13 for sure. But Mark was as ignorant to the X-Men as I was. We were just really big in the heroic storytelling. Larry, the copy of the compendium you sent Eric, what was it based off of? The official handbook of the Marvel Universe. Yes. And when I say copy, I mean you sent Eric the photocopies of this Marvel Universe book. We didn't know who these characters were. Okay. Looking back on it, I was just very excited. But not being a fan, I didn't have an agenda like, oh my god, I've got 38 different characters and I've got to get them all in each episode. Marvel comic editor Bob Perez, thank goodness he was our advisor. He said, look, there's been 25 years of X-Men comics. There's have been all these mixes and matches, he said to Margaret. You guys take it in direction you want to, as long as you stay with the spirit of the characters and don't go outside the world we're dealing with. How did you go into developing your core cast then? One of the things that was aspirational was seeing a team that was nearly half women. All Julia's doing. No, it was not. I wish it was. No, it was dumb luck that it was gender balanced. Jubilee and Gambit were newer. Marvel wanted to make sure to have them, and obviously Professor X and Jean Grey and Cyclops were the core people from the beginning. And Wolverine's the biggest name in the history of X-Men, so you're already up to about 6, and it happened that a couple of those picks were already women. It's interesting if you look back at the old memos between Larry and me and Marvel. We started the core cast that didn't include Beast, and Jean was secondary, and those characters grew as we tried to invite destroys. I mean, we put Beast in jail at the beginning because he was like a titular character, but he reasserted himself because he was so different. I think, too, though, it speaks to, I'll give credit to Margaret Loesch, that the project she was passionate about, I don't recall hearing any pushback. Oh, you got too many girls on the team. We got that in most of the other shows we worked on. Oh, so you can have one girl? Right. You could have a Smurfette is what we called it. You get as many Smurfs you want, but you only get one Smurfette. And one of the things to consider in animated films is the audio. You didn't want several guys that growl with heavy, deep voices. Jubilee doesn't sound like Rogue, which doesn't sound like Storm, which doesn't sound like Jean Grey. And you get the idea. So Larry, can you talk a bit about director's role in anime storytelling? I imagine there's a lot to direct before things are animated. A director is in charge of the show from beginning to delivery of the networks. So I start with the script. When a script comes in, I go through it and read it and see what it's all about. How many props, how many people are going to be in the show. As I assigned that to, it was usually 3-act shows. So I signed up 3 different artists. They take the script, I give them notes, they can go away, come back 4 weeks later, they give me a finished storyboard, and then I have to go through page by page. It's maybe about 400 pages. I had to go through the entire show and make sure they did it right, and if they didn't do something that was part of this show, or it was very boring, I would go through with yellow post-its and I'd redraw the sequences to someone I thought would be dynamic or interesting. Or sometimes they do stuff wrong. Then once that's done, I would hand it over to Tommy Director, would actually go through and time the show out because it's a 22-minute show. So you don't want to send 25-minute show overseas because it's not what the animators are getting paid for. Okay, and then once the episode's animated, then we would get back to the show from overseas. There would be good stuff, bad stuff. You'd have to do a retake list. Okay, this is done right. This is done wrong. Sometimes a mouth would be over here somewhere talking, effect shots and action errors. It's a dual job. I'll be sending shows overseas and getting shows back, and so you have to keep all this stuff in the head all at the same time, shipping shows out, shows coming in, calling retakes, fixing the boards. People don't realize how much overlap there is in an animated show and a live action show. Much easier to write. When you spoke about keeping each script close to time, I love the fact that from previously on X-Men the Making of an Animated Series, Eric Lewald interviews with cast and crew about ex-communicators were used in later seasons of Titan Action even more. When Mark Edens and I laid out the first stories, we just assumed that the sci-fi Star Trek convention of communicators existed when there were 8 or 10 lead characters. It would be chaos for them to try to deal with one big action sequence if they had to be within shouting distance. Because I approached the show with about 12 years of being director beforehand, I knew all the shortcuts of how to make the show fit. And except for some exceptions in Season 1, you would rarely see an X-Men walk across the screen. It's like you'll see the group say, okay, let's go, and then you'll see the exhaust of the jet. It's going back to the shows I grew up with Johnny Quest. But Johnny Quest didn't have a lot of animation. But when you saw the shot, you could look at it for 2 days because it was so well drawn and composed. That's one of the things I was trying to bring to the X-Men. Will and I were both being introduced to anime too. It was just coming over to the 80s, and we would get these large laser discs, and the director and I would, in a filmation studio, and we would just put the disc on, watch the shows, and just analyze it. One of the things that kept coming to the surface while reading previously on how X-Men was allowed to cover serious adult themes like the Nightcrawler episode or even Morph's death, both of those received pushback from network censors, right? First off, let's give a shout out to the woman who deserves credit. A woman named Avery Coburn, who was the broadcast standards and practices person at Fox Kids at the time. And good Lord, we worked on shows where that kind of gatekeeping can just suck the energy out of a project. Avery was someone who was on board with X-Men from the beginning, and if she hadn't been there, it wouldn't be the show it was. Because censors have absolutely authority. I mean, they just say, no, we can't even talk about someone dying, much less show someone dying. Religion, are you crazy? Yeah, we can't refer to religion. We can't have sexual banter about the X-Men because, well, they're all living together in a house, and none of them were married. We had things on other shows where you couldn't be angry at each other because they were on the same team. Yeah, we know. Executives asked us, why do you keep writing characters who are arguing so much? They're a family, duh. Do I have some conflict and drama, or do I not? Or do you want all to be 6 sane people smiling at each other? The gut punch between Wolverine and Cyclops was a particularly big deal too. Right after Morris' death in Night of the Sentinels, Part 2. That was about a 2-week discussion that was almost as long as the death discussion. Can we let Wolverine punch Cyclops? Both of them came down to Avery, understanding that it was all about grief and it wasn't gracious. Right, and all we did once was make a point of setting us apart from Super Friends and other shows out there. And I'd also like to say regarding the Nightcrawler episode, so many folks come out, and when we get a chance to actually talk, specific episodes mean so much to them. I'm so impressed with Nightcrawler because it doesn't proselytize. It doesn't say you have to be a Christian, you need to convert. It's a respectful exploration about religion and what it means to one person and what it can and cannot mean to someone else. I don't know if you could get away with telling that story today, though. There's a line that Gambit has at the very end, just before Rogue sees Wolverine in the church. He's basically saying, "Oh, there is no God. Life's just a crapshoot, just a game of cards." And on our first line of notes, it was, "No, you've got to cut this out. We can't say something this extreme, and that's part of the balance with censors. If Avery gave me 30 notes on that, I could question a dozen of them and say, well, can we do this? Or we really need to do this one thing here." I have one Avery Coburn story that I've shared before, but we found an old memo. It was an old episode in the Savage Land, and there's volcanoes and stuff. Bad things are happening. But we see a dinosaur fall in a volcano, and a memo from Avery to Executive Sidney Eyebrenner is, "Okay, you can have this action, but you can't have that action. But I'm going to need to see the dinosaur climb out of the volcano so we know he's okay." Julia, this reminded me when you went to Fox Studios in the first season. We didn't know how kids reacted to the show. We would get the ratings, which came out once a week, and we'd read the X-Men that was really doing well, and Fox executive said, "Well, come with me, I'll show you." We go out to the hallway where these big, milky cartons that hold mail that the USPS uses. There is a stack of those. It's stacked up to the ceiling. They're stacked all around the hall and way back. She said, "Everything in here. These are all for X-Men. These are all kids who love the X-Men." That's how we found out. Why do you think it's resonated so well with kids? Larry has a theory on it. Part of it was because the show was written so that a younger audience would be very entertained by the laser beams and the explosions, had a lot of eye candy. But these guys wrote a lot of subtext into, so when people got older and they saw the reruns, they started picking up on what everybody else set up. The adult relationships, how people were being persecuted in society, so on and so on. So I think too, the X-Men themselves, to turn into a mutant when you hit puberty, and you maybe become a mutant, maybe you don't. I don't think a kid in America can relate to a feeling so different. Oh my God, what's happened to my world? That you can't identify. You'll pick out your X-Men. Who were those X-Men for all of you? Any favorites or someone you love to write? Always jump in with Dear Beast. Hank McCoy, the damaged poet who was just the smartest guy in the room. It was fun writing for him because every writer likes to think that he is or she is the smartest person in the room. Here, Beast actually was the smartest person in the room. So writing for him was kind of like, yeah, I can do this. I can keep up with the Beast. And again, back in 1992, no internet, those quotes that you came up with for him to say, we had the Bartlett's Book of Quotations. So he's talking about a battle attack. What quote would you use for a battle? Writing for a Beast was a joy, very much so. I emphasized that most with Xavier. I had 20 different people who wrote X-Men for me, and keeping all of them writing, keeping it smooth and consistent. I felt like very much like Xavier dealing with 8 different X-Men who were all such different people. I very much emphasized with the father figure in charge of holding the Enterprise together. Larry, who did you like to draw best? It would be a tie between Wolverine and Rogue, because Rogue could pretty much punch her way out of anything, and the Wolverine would just slice and dice. Although, with Wolverine I had to be careful because if we didn't have the Sentinels, he would have nothing to do because his power is to eviscerate and disembowel. Larry, I know you and Will had fun planting Easter eggs too. As a comic book fans behind X-Men, you were both responsible for many series cameos. I used to read the comic books back in the 60s. I'd be reading a Spider-Man book in one panel. You'd see Thor go through a panel. Then at the bottom, Sam would say, if you want to see where Thor's going, buy issue, something. And it created a connected universe. I wanted to bring that childhood excitement to the show. But what I discovered early on is that I couldn't call the characters their names, and I submitted the work into the system because I tried that with Spider-Man once, but they kicked it out. There's an episode called Slave Island where the writers wrote Mutant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got my books. I told the artist, okay, make this the Blob, make this Mystique, make this, Sunfire. I started populating with more characters, but I kept the same names. Mutant 1. We had to ask to have Captain America in. It took a couple 3 weeks to get it approved for the Old Soldiers episode. Okay. One of my favorite arcs was the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix saga. I think it was the best screen adaptation to date. How different was it to adapt so closely with the source material versus working off an original story? The few times we made direct adaptations like the Days of Future Past or Phoenix, we felt fans of the original comics would care about these stories, so we only chose to make changes when we had to. Much of both Phoenix adaptations had to do with trimming down secondary characters and focus on a core story of Phoenix. What meant focusing on Xavier and Lilandra, since there's a huge crisis was playing out, and the best points of view for the audience in Dark Phoenix, we shifted the point of view more to Cyclops because the great crises were happening in the world we love, and it would make the most dramatic and heartfelt story. I made sure that all of Off-World locales matched the comic books stories they were based on. My fanboy memories of Marvel alien races went back, so I went with them all that time. As far as staging the battles, I encouraged the storyboard artists to use as much of the staging from the books whenever possible. There were a few scenes in Phoenix that I made sure to mimic the images from issue Uncanny X-Men number 137, Phoenix Must Die. Like when the X-Men first appear on the deck of a Shi'ar ship, The Fate of the Phoenix. Yep. Anyone else have a favorite multi-parter? Time Fugitives would be the one for me. The script came in and part 2 didn't match up with part 1 in terms of live action sequences. So for part 2 I had to re-storyboard about 40 or 50 pages to match up so what it looked like the timeline with new stuff happening. I did the scene of Apocalypse growing out of a building and he shoots his rays and kills the X-Men, so it upped the stakes. Like, oh crap, how are they going to get out of this one? I was having fun with it, trying to be the fan and the professional at the same time. To Julia, I know what your favorite two-parter is. I got to write the Days of Future Past Part 1, and being challenged to write what we were going to write for Saturday morning kids show, it was like, how, but everyone is started with Margaret Loesch from the top down, was like, you do not write down to kids, you write up. Pretend this is half-hour live-action drama at night, and you just go for it. And I've never been given that kind of latitude before. One man's worth, that was the one that felt rightest to me. Right, yeah. It's like, here's a story, this is the reason X-Men exists, because the question was, what would happen if Xavier was killed when he was younger? And there would have never been an X-Men. That was such a simple story, but I mean, we were ripping off people like This Is a Wonderful Life and A City of the Edge of Forever from Star Trek. You can't take your inspirations where you can, but when the idea came to me, it was like, okay, in 4 years, this is the best idea I've had for a show, and thank God it happened. I didn't think it in a year after we were done. It killed me that Storm and Wolverine were an awful future parallel universe. Wolverine and Storm in that story, Eric wrote one out for first interracial kisses, interracial marriages in animation, but something else that Eric did when they created the story of One Man's Worth. Marvel liked so much that they went ahead and inspired the Age of Apocalypse. Okay, I was able to take the Age of Apocalypse designs and incorporate Eric's stories, so you got a chance to see those characters that they were designed for in the comics. This is the first time I'm hearing that. That's wonderful. I did not realize that. We just thought it was the original Brilliance. The series theme song and opening sequence, though, that was Willie's Brilliance. All Larry and Will's doing. I drew the intro. Initially, I drew way more images than we needed, Will. So, who was the supervising producer? Created the first two dynamic scenes and followed his lead and culled it all down into the intro that we used. The order making the animated series as the full, unedited version I drew. Oh, and the final music for the intro is probably version number 12 or 13. All prior versions weren't good enough. We held out until we got it just perfect. Can we just talk about the voice actors for a moment? X-Men delivered some iconic performances. I love me some Hugh Jackman, but I can hear Cal Dodd when I think of Wolverine. Your actors were all Canadian, right? And after an entire first round of auditions, you wouldn't find anyone who was close to a good fit. It was wrong. It was so wrong. They recorded the first show and they came back to Los Angeles and Margaret and everybody was like, oh my god, this is awful. And they had to send Sydney and myself up to Toronto to see what the hell was wrong with the shot and correct it. Luckily, instead of having traditional cartoon voices, they found actors who worked in theater, so they had better range and inflections in the stories. So they didn't do traditional Scooby-Doo or something. They actually put feelings and voices on small words. And one of the two that I can remember immediately was Cal Dodd. He was not a voice actor, he was a singer, and he came to do the voice on a whim. As soon as we heard it, don't let him go anywhere. We got Wolverine. And exactly the same thing happened with Rogue. Lenore Zane came in casually. She had actually turned down coming in the read. I even had to bug her to come in there, and when she did, she nailed it one take. Lenore Zane is perfect. I think there was one certain amount of luck in this. I really think that the first recording so freaked everybody out so that we all bent over backwards. They spent 2 weeks in Canada overcompensating and getting the most intense voices they could find in the country. They beat our people because the first ones were so wrong. Okay, a hard-hitting one now. Are you aware of the Wolverine crush meme? Yes. Okay. I want to turn that meme on its head, I bet. So, Jean Crush Edition. Cyclops or Wolverine? Well, I kind of like Cyclops, I swear. Wolverine and Storm need to be together in our universe, so I would hope that Jean and Scott would be a happy couple. I think I respect her adult decision-making, the honesty enough that she stayed with Scott through all 76 episodes. She had the opportunity, and also Wolverine's had like 15 doomed love affairs. Well, he's older, Yeah? No. Let Scott have one relationship, so yeah, I'll have to go with Scott, too. Cyclops with an unanimous vote. Wrapping up with Where Are They Now special. Anyone staying up to speed with the current X-Men comics? A lot has changed. I'm aware that it has, but I've not been keeping up beyond just sort of casual fangoing. Oh, Jubilee became a vampire. Oh, and she had a baby. Yep, she's a mom too. And then didn't Rogue and Gambit get one moment's peace to get a chance to marry for a brief while? They are still married, yeah, making it happen. Do you guys think Rogue and Gambit are in for a long haul? Oh yeah, yes, and believe me, an awful lot of people ask us about Rogue and Gambit. That's like number one. I think that made Gambit even more popular. Right. That unrequited love, or the love that couldn't be. Put an obstacle between two people that are in love and can't be together. Yeah, I think that's what made it classic. and those two were thrown together. Yeah, I think there's something there forever. I think he's just enough of a scoundrel that she likes it, and he likes her. We amply say that he's off with different women every night in a show, but he'd give them all up for Rogue. I love it when they get their one moment together in the Savage Land where their powers are repressed and they're able to kiss. In Reunion Part 2, they kiss and I just love it. Gambit is so true to the form when he says, "Gambit, love you." It was not, "I love you." Gambit, love you. Oh my God. He can't even say it, but it's close enough for me. Thank you all. The show has been influential for a number of reasons. I hope you're glad to hear that. Now that we've had the opportunity to go out to hear from people, it's been thrilling to hear from all you folks the show that we was talking about. Eric and Julie and I, we got in the convention circuit, and it really felt good to actually know that the efforts were appreciated. So anyway, guys, that's just the information I wanted to share about the X-Men. And if you like this content, make sure you hit a thumbs up, because I'm going to go get some dinner. And you guys have a nice day. Bye.